Hi modelers, it's Chris here, the modeler at ABR Modelworks. And in this video, laying track on ABR lines, vlog number 11, I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to go about laying track. But before we get into that, there's some things that you need to take into consideration before you get to the track laying stage. And one of those questions that needs to be answered is, how is this railway going to operate? Are you going to be running it completely manually? In which case it doesn't matter too much about what you do, other than you have to take into consideration the electrics of things like your points, etc. Or are you going to go right to the other end of the scale and have it completely automatic? So I'm planning on being able to do both. Because this is a display layout that I'm going to be taking to some of the train shows, I need it to be able to run automatically. Now, I don't want it just to run automatically in terms of running around a loop. I want it to be looking like it's doing something. So let's go back to the basics here. I'm using Pico Code 83 rail. I'm also using their Electrofrog system for the points, etc. To control it in the automatic stage, I'm going to be putting some Arduinos on the layout. I'm going to be using a combination between current detectors, Hall effect detectors, which are detectors that are detected from using a magnet, infrared, and then a bunch of relays, etc. Now the relays are going to be used to swap the polarity on the points. So the points are going to be activated using a servo motor, and when the pointers change direction, the relay will kick in to change the polarity. So the track is going to be divided up into a whole bunch of different sections. Even the points themselves will be a section, so that when the rolling stock or locomotives are within the area of a point, I can tell that it's there and the switch won't be able to be thrown and derail the train. So one of the first things that I'm going to be doing is working out exactly where the isolation points need to be. Now I've already done that, but you need to make sure that you've thought about that process. Also, it is a modular layout, and so where it joins on at the other modules, etc., I need to take into consideration how I'm going to be doing that. So although I'm not going to be doing any of the wiring in this video, other than the dropping down of the feeders, so it's worth mentioning at this stage because there's going to be a whole bunch of extra feeders added to power up those sections. So here's a quick update as the progress so far. I've currently got 2 points pinned down that are all connected, and the little joining tracks, the stubs between them, have feeder wires and isolators, etc. The same as this. The entry from the next module, that track is done. Unfortunately, I don't have a double slip, so I can't go any further with this other than this little stub section. At this stage, it's all looking good. Now, it's not glued down, it's just sitting with pins to hold it in place while I'm checking everything. And I'll continue to do the same thing along the board to the other end where there is another set of points matching up. Now, one of the things that I always like to do when I'm doing any sort of job like this where there's a fair amount of repetition is things like the feeder wires, as an example. I cut a whole bunch of them and tin them so they're ready to go, and that saves a few minutes fiddling around each time. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is the sections. So as I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be using current detectors so that I can see where the trains are, or the wagons, locomotives, etc. Each of the red pins indicate where it's cut through, and there's isolators or etc. And that means that in this section here, that's a section, and I can tell if there's anything parked up in that. And the same here, that's a section, and this one will be a section as well. The idea being is that I can control the layout in such a way that points won't get thrown when there's rolling stock or locomotives parked on top of them, so it hopefully won't cause any issues as far as derailments are concerned. But as I said also at the beginning of the video, I intend to run this layout both in manual and automatic mode. I'll be using a series of Arduinos and possibly JMRI to control the layout. So moving forward now, I'll just keep going down the line. preparing the pieces of track, getting them ready for gluing down. So I now have the left hand end of the yard done with the feeder wires and all positioned, ready to drill the holes for the feeder wires and glue that down in place. The right hand end is done, and the track is running up to here. What I'm going to do a little bit differently, I've already run some wagons up and down the other end where I've been using the caulking as a glue, and to be honest with you, I'm not 100% certain whether it's really any different in terms of the noise. So this end of the yard I'm going to glue down with Gorilla Glue, how I would normally do it, and that way as the trains run across the two areas I'll be able to really assess the difference. So from that I'll be able to decide which is the better way to go. I do have a couple of other little things I can try to remove that noise from the rolling stock and the engines rolling over the rail. Here's some photos of the track being glued down. Note my trusty weights. So here's a quick flyby of the track all glued down, with the exception of the double slip. Unfortunately it hasn't arrived, and it's still a few days away. Okay, so we're at the fun part of building a model railway, or at least for me. What I really like doing is making the scene come to life with the buildings and the roadways and the people and the cars and all the things that go into a real railway itself. So where are we at as far as the track laying is concerned? The track now is pretty much complete except for the track where the double slip is situated, and that unfortunately won't be here for another week or thereabouts. So in the meantime I'm going to get on with doing some of the scenery items, starting with the roadway itself. So if you remember from earlier footage and photos, we have a road running around in front of the buildings and disappearing down off the end of the baseboard around near the station. The road itself is going to be lifted off the ground level by about 5 millimeters, and there'll be a slight rise in it where it runs over the track itself. The basic ground and scenery will undulate a little bit because the ground is just not flat, so there will be some rise and fall in the baseboard. The buildings are roughly positioned at the moment to give you an idea of what I'm thinking, but that might change. For example, the design of the pellet factory is going to have some changes to it, because I've decided that I want to put a building at the end of the pellet factory where we'll store timber. These pieces of MDF leaning against the background there is a bit of a representation of some building flats that will be designed and available as kits for this layout, and so that's just to give us a bit of an idea or a placeholder for the moment. There's a couple of things that I'm going to be changing about how I initially thought the station and the freight depot would be, but other than that, this is basically the layout as it stands at the moment. So other than starting to do some scenery, one of the other big jobs that needs to be done is the wiring of the layout, and at the moment the layout really only has feeder wires hanging down, and I have connected the feeder wire on this section of track so that I can test and run the locomotive. But all the wiring and the control panels and things like that will be a project in itself, and I'll go through in a little bit of detail about how I'm going to go do that, and we'll do some videos on the wiring to give you a bit of an idea of how I'm going to do it. From a display point of view, when I talked earlier about the display being semi-automated, I'm basically going to have, you know, a locomotive with a wagon being running around up and down into the sidings, etc., so it can run in a sort of automated mode, doing that sort of movement. At a later date, when we start building the other modules, and of course then we'll have other trains running and them pulling into sidings and doing other jobs. So now that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Now if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and ring the bell. That really helps us with YouTube in promoting the channel. I'm Chris the Modeller at ABR Model Works. Have a great day modelling, and of course run some trains.